Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us again on this Monday on Head to Head, a Star Wars show. Well, like I said, it's Monday, so you know what that means. It means it's time for either another top 10 list, another review, or some informal Star Wars discussion. Tonight, we're going to be taking a look at our top 10 bounty hunters. That's right, each of us are going to give our top 10 bounty hunters and why. And we hope that you guys will join in the discussion, and it's happening right now.
You're listening to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars begins now.
All right, hello, everybody. I'm Eric Vansel.
And I'm Daryl Sanders.
And we're your hosts for this show. So this ought to be really fun because we've been talking about doing this for a long time.
Yeah, man. It'll be a day long remembered, as Vader would say.
Well, and the thing about this is bounty hunters in general, I think sometimes as much attention as they're getting lately because of the whole Mandalorian and, all that stuff, I still think that a lot of times they're unappreciated characters in the whole Star Wars universe.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, you don't really get to see them a whole lot in action in the original, well, any of the saga series, but where you really get a chance to see them is in the Clone Wars animation series. That's where they kind of really kind of show their merit. And honestly, yeah, there's some ones that I wasn't aware of until I watched the series, and I just completely fell in love with them. So this should be fun.
Oh yeah, I have a feeling that this is just going to be a fantastic thing. So with that said, are you ready to do it?
Let's go.
All right. So your top 10. What do you got for number 10?
Number 10, I have Miss Sabine Wren. Sabine is my top 10 because she's young and she's part of the whole Mandalore tribe or whatnot, but you really don't get a chance to see her really in action as a bounty hunter. I mean, you could tell that she's very skilled with munitions. That's kind of her specialty, that and high-end graffiti and tagging. But other than that, though, I mean, but she's really good at like explosive and armaments. That's kind of where she lives, and you see that a lot of that once again in the Clone Wars series. So Sabine kind of falls into number 10 just because we don't get a chance to see her in totality as a true bounty hunter. However, we do get to see her skill set as a formidable fighter and as a munitions expert. So she does have bounty hunter background. It's just that we really don't get a chance to see it, but she's still a really, really cool character. And so that's why I have her at my number 10.
I can see that. I mean, honestly, she's one of those characters that it's like you said, I actually kind of forgot she was a bounty hunter. I mean,
yeah.
in a sense, because she
you don't
is
see
a
her in that
Mandalorian.
capacity. Right.
Yeah, and that's it. And I hope a lot of people out there don't actually think that all Mandalorians are bounty hunters, because that's not necessarily the case, but it is pretty much what a lot of them tend to do, though, and Sabine is certainly no exception to that. I could go for that, though. I mean, I could see that. Now, I don't think she actually appeared anywhere on any of my lists, but so for me, for my number 10, I had to go for Greedo.
Greedo.
Yeah, Greedo. I mean,
Okay.
So Greedo, he's one of those guys that, he tends to be, I think, overlooked. But
Okay.
if you actually go into a lot of the lore, he's actually a pretty formidable bounty hunter.
Mm-hmm.
If you read a lot of the comic books, if you read a lot of the, just like a lot of, and again, it's not, if you just go by the movies, I mean, what? You see the guy for like, what seems like maybe 5 minutes or something,
right.
And then he gets off by Han Solo. But I mean, this guy, Greedo is pretty much, I think anyway, one of the bounty hunters that it's one of those things like in the expanded universe, in comics and stuff like that, he's looked upon as just like crazy. He's really, really powerful. He's really good. He's really cunning. All these things, right? But then if you look at him in the movie, he's in there for like 5 minutes or something, like you said, and it's just, I don't know.
Well, the other thing about Rodians, man, they're actually kind of crafty. They're
Yes.
that race is just in and of itself kind of like slick and crafty, and we've seen the other bounty hunters, not Greedo, but other bounty hunters of his race, kind of do stuff like once again in the Clone Wars, where they poisoned that one particular senator, or whatever, and they were like knocking off all those senators like left and right, and it was like a Rodian that was actually doing it.
Yeah, and I mean that's a good point too. Actually, is that you really learn more about Greedo's race, and pretty much like where everybody. I mean, I guess basically like the nature of these guys, and it's true. They all share that somewhat deceptive, underhanded, kind of operating on the down low, sort of. And I mean, I just think that he's one of those guys again that is just completely underrated. Not so much because we see his end or whatever, but if you start reading a lot of the stuff in the beginning, and I think that's the way that a lot of these people that we have in the top 10 for each of us are going to be, because, let's face it, a lot of these characters, there's going to be people that are like, who? Right?
Yeah.
Like, they're going to be like, I don't even know who this person is. Now, I mean, most people, I mean, just about everybody knows who Greedo is because of the who shot first thing.
Right.
But even Sabine, she's certainly not, like, all that well known, unless you actually watch Rebels. So,
yeah, I think that when you look at Greedo, like you said, like with a lot of bounty hunters, you don't get a chance to see them at their kind of zenith, or their kind of in their whole element. I think that's what the word I'm looking for. But yeah, you don't really get to see them in their element, and that's the unfortunate thing. But once again, Han just automatically knew who Greedo was. Once again, like Han knows all the top guys, so you automatically kind of have to think about it like, if Han knows him, because Han himself is the top guy, so you're going to kind of know all those top guys in your sector, whether you're a smuggler, bounty hunter, crime boss or crime lord. You're going to know.
Yeah, and again, one of the things that I always thought was really cool just about Greedo overall, and again, I mean, to a lot of people that are watching this, you might, first of all, you might think I'm crazy, like, really, dude, Greedo? But honestly, it's, if you actually start to look at the context, like, okay, he's obviously one of Jabba's main guys. Han knows who he is. He seems to run in a lot of the top, bounty hunter, like groups or whatever.
That whole circle.
Yeah, so I just think that, again, I get it. Greedo's probably not the obvious choice, but, he ended up barely making it in the countdown pretty much. All right, so who's your number 9?
Number 9, I have to go with Aurra Sing.
Aurra Sing.
Yeah. So Aurra Sing, I always thought she had a cool look. Like, she was fearless. She was she was very smart, but at the same time, I don't think that she was really as top tier as some of the rest of the guys, obviously on my list.
Yeah.
She taught Boba Fett, she kind of pretty much introduced him to the world of bounty hunting. And I think that's what she's really good for. I think she's great at kind of just being that big sister role, or playing that kind of position where she's kind of known based upon the company she keeps. I think she works better when she's with a group versus just being solo.
No pun intended, right?
Right. So yeah, I think Aurra Sing is, she's formidable. Like, she's like most bounty hunters, you kind of have to have a certain level of cunning and slyness to you in order to kind of trap these people, and even to get yourself out of sticky situations when people are trying to run, or they're trying to escape or whatnot. So she's crafty in her own ways, but I just think that she got best, and she even got bested by Beckett, who really,
and a lot of people don't really like a couple of the things, just in case there is anybody out there going, okay, now who's this now? It's like, when are we going to, okay, we got Greedo, but when are we going to actually get to somebody I actually know, right? So Aurra Sing makes a couple of notable appearances, at least in what I would say, like a general canon sense. The first one, which of course you're referring to, is they mention her in Star Wars, or Solo, a Star Wars story.
Mm-hmm.
and that the Beckett character ended up like killing her or whatever. But the main point where we actually see her though is back in the Clone Wars
Mm-hmm.
when she's hanging out with like Bosk, and she sort of takes Boba Fett under her wing.
Yep.
And that
Yeah.
gets into what you're talking about a little bit with, kind of that mentor type of a thing.
Yeah, kind of helping him kind of hone in his rage because he was mad, of course, at Mace Windu. He really wanted to kill Mace Windu, and she was trying to help him do it, but at the same time, Boba was just too headstrong. And
Yeah, well, but now this is a good point too, is that so when she was actually taking Boba under her wing, it was fascinating to me, especially if you're watching the Clone Wars, how she knew when to be somewhat nurturing with him, but then she also knew when to be really tough because as a bounty hunter, you have to survive under pretty crazy circumstances, actually.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. She kind of had that, and I think that kind of, in some ways, weakened her a bit because she had that softer side.
Yeah, no, I would agree. And that could very well be why she ended up
Defeated.
essentially losing her life to Beckett. But I mean, one of the things that I think is really important about any of these things that we're doing, any of these choices that we're making, is you have to understand we're not necessarily going with strictly who's the most popular.
Right.
We're going with essentially like who we actually think, if we had to rank these people, where would they fall? Now, did you have any issues trying to find a bunch of people that you knew? Because, I started thinking about it. I'm like, man, maybe I should have picked like top 5 because I'm like, are there even 10 bounty hunters I can name?
Well, yeah, like at least with my list, and you'll see it kind of gets creative. And I know some people may argue with me on my list as far as where I have certain people, and there's kind of a reason
Same
for
here.
that.
Same here.
Even looking back at my list, like, dang, I probably should have put this person a little bit higher, but it's too late now. But it's one of those things where, as you kind of keep thinking about certain aspects of these bounty hunters, you kind of have to really just look at it and it's just like, man, this is actually really difficult to kind of rank them because they all have something or a quality that's really amazing about them. It's just like, where do you really, in a grand scheme of things, you have to take some things into consideration. So at the end of this, it'll probably be cool to actually kind of find out like what was our meter, our gauge, to say like, okay, as far as like what we were looking for in picking these people.
Certainly we could do that. Now Ronaldo comments in it, says it's a shame we never saw her in live action.
Yeah.
And it does make me wonder if we're ever going to see her at all in live action. Like, are they going to do something where,
I thought I saw her once in Return of the Jedi years ago, but it wasn't her.
Yeah, well, I mean, the thing is, and honestly, I don't know about you, but I used to get her confused with Asajj Ventress all the time.
Oh, yeah.
They kind of have that similar look.
Definitely.
So, I mean, I don't know, but I agree with Ronaldo. I think that it would have been amazing to see her in some sort of live action. And hey, don't forget, guys, it's not too late because they're jumping around the timeline a lot. So they can always do something. I mean, Beckett kills her around Solo, so it's like somewhere kind of like toward the beginning between episode 3 and 4. It's a little bit closer probably to 3, maybe. I mean, it's probably about like 10 years because Harrison Ford was basically like around 30 when he did A New Hope. And I think Han Solo's age more or less tracks with Harrison's. And, I think Solo, he's like around 20, 23, somewhere in there. So, I mean, I think it's safe to say that it's roughly 10 years before A New Hope. So they could actually do something with Aurra Sing if they really wanted to. Because, I mean, look, she was featured heavily in the Clone Wars. So, and apparently she was active. She was still doing stuff. So I say, why not? All right.
Yeah. Ronaldo also said she had a little cameo in Phantom Menace.
Ah, did she?
I'm trying to remember.
Yeah,
I'm trying to think of that scene as well.
Yeah,
I'm sure
us
Ronaldo
being
will cut it.
us being yeah, right, and us being the super Star Wars fans that apparently we are.
Well, I mean, if it's a cameo, you know, you can kind of
Well,
say,
but I mean, usually and that's the thing. I'm actually trying to think of when did I even first hear of her, because I want to say it was the Clone Wars, but I can't help but think that maybe there was a little bit of a almost like a familiarity. Like when she was in the Clone Wars, it was kind of like, oh yeah, that's Aura Singh.
yeah. Yeah, Ronaldo's gonna have to refresh my memory on that one.
Yeah, we're gonna have to come back with that. But in the meantime, my number 9 is kind of an interesting one,
Yeah, okay.
and I had to try to remember. I had to remember stuff. It's one of those things that I definitely remember that he was super powerful, but I couldn't remember a lot of details. And that is the Wookiee bounty hunter, Black Chrysanthemum.
Oh wow,
Yeah, check that guy out.
they look like Braveheart or one of the guys that stormed the Capitol.
Right? Like the dude with the horns is
Horns.
basically with them or whatever.
Exactly.
But this guy, he was actually hired by Vader for a bunch of different jobs. Oh, what else did he do? He was instrumental in a lot of stuff. Like he started working for Jabba, then Vader hired him for a bunch of stuff, and then he was actually, I think, in the Dr. Aphra comics as well, where she might have even teamed up with them a little bit. But I remember thinking, one of the reasons why I put this guy in the list, because yet again, this is another guy that most people are going to be like, I don't even know who this is.
Right.
But it's important to note, and this is what I'm hoping that people get out of this, besides the fact that this is just kind of like a fun little short episode that we wanted to do to, we want to do more of these like top 5, top 10, like these countdown kind of things, because they're kind of cool, and anybody that wants to chat in with us or, put stuff in the comment section, it's a lot of good discussion points. And sometimes we actually learn a lot about these characters, like, Ronaldo usually chats in something, or Jason, of course, when he comments and everything, and, a lot of our other regular viewers. But, people, when they comment on stuff, I really think it's cool, because a lot of times, I have to admit, people bring up stuff that I've either forgotten about or stuff that I never even really knew, or, and I go in, I start researching, and then I get a lot of enjoyment out of it. So I appreciate that. And this guy, he's one of those guys that he actually plays a pretty prominent role when you look at the canon as a whole. He's not somebody that I'm not even going to say just casual. I'm going to say even more like serious Star Wars fans probably don't even know about this guy.
Yeah, I mean, I've never heard of him.
I only ran across him because he was in some comics and stuff like that, but he's pretty powerful. And I mean, not only is he powerful and he's good, and, he would go up against a lot of really, crazy enemies and stuff like that, but he was kind of a go-to guy, and he almost rose up to be kind of like right at that Boba Fett level, where he was like Jabba's right-hand guy, or somebody that, would regularly be hired by him to do stuff.
I wonder this. Now, it just dawned on me, because one, I've never seen or even heard of a Wookiee bounty hunter, which is, I mean, cool in of itself, because Wookiees are cool. But like, I wonder, like, does he speak English? Or because it's like, if you're collecting a bounty on somebody, it's just like, if I don't know what the heck you're talking about, you see what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, no, that's a good point. I mean, well, you know what though? That brings up a point. Does any Wookiee actually speak? Because I've heard
that was going to be my next thing.
I've heard that some Wookiees actually do speak English, but we've never seen that.
Never. Tarful,
Ever.
None of them. It's just like,
Now, I think I've seen that in some comics somewhere, and I don't know, maybe this is the guy. I mean, Ronaldo basically says, I really want to see this guy in live action. Love him. He's like a heavy metal version of Chewbacca. Right?
I know, man.
Well, that's kind of what I looked at too. I mean, if you look at this guy, he's like, I mean, this guy looks like he could just rip Chewbacca into bits.
Yeah, I mean, he looks like Caesar from like Planet of the Apes, man.
Yes, exactly. Like Chewbacca meets Caesar. That is totally a good point. But that is a good point, though, because, you got some Wookiee growling at you. Now, granted, Sri Wook, I think, is the language, but,
Yep.
it's kind of like apparently a lot of people sort of speak it, I guess. I mean, I don't know. It just seems to me, because in the Star Wars universe, for anybody that doesn't know, any fan actually knows this, but basic. Basic is what is English in the Star Wars universe. They call it basic. So that's kind of a language that everybody knows, that pretty much everybody can speak. But you never, ever see an example of Wookiees ever speaking it.
Nope.
They never really, and it doesn't even seem like, now I've heard, and I don't know how true this is, I have heard that it's difficult for them to actually, form the words and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
That basic is kind of, it's not really conducive to them. They have a really hard time with it. But I don't know. All I know is that this guy came at me, though, it'd be like, all right, man,
what do you want? What do you want?
Whatever you want. I don't, it's like, look, just point and I'll go. Because it just seems to me like if this guy's catching, it's like, who's going to fight him?
Nobody. Unless you're just like, maybe like one of those, what did it call? It's the shark-like creatures. It starts with a K, I think.
I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, I can't think of the name of the race at the moment.
Yeah,
it's like Cardons or something like that. But Ronaldo says, well, in the comics, he doesn't speak English, but everyone understands him.
I'll bet they do.
Yeah, especially you have a blaster pointing towards you. Yeah, I bet you understand at that point.
Yeah, it is kind of weird to me. How that actually works, because you see people like Chewbacca, you see all these people interacting, and the other thing that's really interesting to me too is when you go back and you watch Solo: A Star Wars Story, right, and you see Chewbacca and Han meeting for the first time, Han starts speaking to him in Sri Wook, but that's like the only time he ever does that. It's almost like Wookiee growls at him in that language, but then Han always answers him in basic.
Yeah, and that's crazy because they actually understand basic. They just can't speak it. Or that's what it seems like.
Exactly. And that's the thing that kind of freaks me out. Like, I don't, you know what I mean? It's like, I mean, it's one of those things that I get it. It's people are probably watching this going, okay, guys, you're really overthinking this a little bit. But I can't help it, man. That's what we do as Star Wars fans. But I mean, I just think that, overall, I had to put this guy, I put him in number 9. A lot of times people would think, okay, if this guy's really super powerful and all this stuff, why is he at 9? Right? Because this guy looks like he could take out a lot of the top guys, and he actually could.
Mm-hmm.
But the method to my madness on that one is only because, and we'll probably get into this when we talk a little bit more about, I mean, generally we probably should have done it at the beginning, but I think it is more fun at the end where you give the list and then you give the criteria.
Mm-hmm.
But just as like a little bit of a sneak peek, part of the criteria was also like how much we've seen these people in action in order to really gauge fully what they've done. And as much as he has been featured in comics and things like that, I just feel that a lot of people, a lot of the other bounty hunter choices out there are a little bit more, not just more well-known, but it's like all of their adventures, exploits, their attributes, their strengths, weaknesses, all that stuff is a little bit more easy to, I think, gauge than a character like this, where he hasn't been featured enough for us to truly, really be able to appreciate everything that he can do.
Ronaldo also adds a nice, interesting fact. A Wookiee speaks English in the comic adaptation of Heir to the Empire, but it's a speech impediment according to the comic.
Maybe that's what it was, because I knew that I had seen another instance of that. That there was another Wookiee that was actually speaking English somewhere. And you know what I think it was? In Heir to the Empire, I think he was a Jedi, because I think there was a Wookiee Jedi in that. And I know we've had other instances where we've had Wookiee Jedi before, but specifically in Heir to the Empire, along with, your Kip Durrons and and of course Jaina and Jason Solo and all that. I can't remember his name, but yeah, there was like a Wookiee Jedi in there too. And yeah, and that was it. It was a speech impediment because these guys can't really speak the language very well. So it's one of those things. But this guy, like I said, I mean, you had to put him in the list because if anybody sees this guy, you're just like, you know what? That's the guy I'm hiring to do something, whether he's an enforcer or not. All right, so who do you got for your number 8?
For my number 8, I have Embo. This guy, I really fell in love with this character in the Clone Wars. He's super cool to me. He doesn't talk, but he's he's super agile. He can run really fast. He's back, and as far as hand-to-hand combat, I mean, he's pretty much like second to none. I mean, the guy is ridiculous to the point where he even like stood up against Anakin and was able to like pretty much best him in a lot of different ways.
Oh yeah, people forget about that. I mean, he was and I'm trying to remember how many episodes he was featured in the Clone Wars.
Well, one of the biggest ones and one of my favorite ones is the one where they were looking for that one bounty. They had all those bounty hunters, and they had there's like the test or the trial that they were trying to put them on to figure out who was going to be the next, the main bounty hunter. And it was Obi-Wan was actually in disguise, but Embo was in there. Yeah, and it was like that little cube thing, and they had to go through all these little tests to kind of get out. And man, Embo was actually like doing this thing, man. And he's always been formal. He can throw that little hat, kind of like Oddjob from James Bond. He could take that thing off. He was using it like as a shield. He was using it as like a snowboard one time. The guy is just super resourceful. And he's only second to Cad Bane. Like he's really up there as far as formidable bounty hunters. And so, although when I say that, he's second to Cad Bane, why is he at number 8? I get it. This is one of those situations where you kind of have. I have him here for a reason. Although I did think about switching him with another bounty hunter, which I'll get to in a minute. But Embo, man, is crazy good, and he actually survived throughout most of the stuff, and the New Republic actually just allowed him to just retire on Felucia. So Embo, he's definitely one of my favorite guys.
Well, the thing about him, and you bring up a good point when you say, he'll throw his little hat around kind of like Oddjob, and it leads me to think about the influence of a lot of these bounty hunters, like whether it was George Lucas when he created a lot of them, or, let's face it, I'm sure Dave Filoni is probably responsible for a lot of the Clone Wars ones, although, it's up in the air. Not really sure which one of those guys created Embo, but it makes you wonder where they draw their influence from, because if you look at each one of the bounty hunters, many of whom we're covering in this episode, you can kind of glean from just either their overall look or their demeanor, the way they conduct themselves, that sort of thing. You could tell, this guy's more like this, or this guy's more like that.
Yeah, definitely. Like Embo, kind of like I said, he has that Oddjob thing, because Oddjob, remember, he never talked.
Yep.
But he threw the hat, but the other person he reminds me of is the style of his hat and the way his armor and his dress.
Are you gonna say Raiden?
No, Kung Lao from Mortal Kombat.
Oh yeah, okay. So
who also threw his hat, what I'm saying? But I can see where you were thinking Raiden. But see that part, also kind of intrigued me too. I was like, I often wonder if it was that if he was inspired by those characters.
Well, no, I mean, the thing about the Mortal Kombat series is you could see that inspiring a lot. I mean, granted, there's probably a lot of inspiration that the creators of Mortal Kombat probably came up with for these characters, but at the same time, those guys, Scorpion, Sub-Zero, Raiden, even Johnny Cage, which I think he was modeled after Van Damme.
Yep.
So, I mean, there were influences on those guys, but I think that the Mortal Kombat characters definitely influenced a lot of things that came after them. And it would not surprise me in the least if, you look at, somebody like Embo over here, right? It's kind of like he's obviously has a little bit of that kind of Oriental style influence, that kind of
definitely.
like Asian
Yep.
samurai kind of thing going,
Twank going on with him.
yeah. And I just think that it's one of those things that, again, he's another one that's overlooked, even though he was featured fairly heavily at times in the Clone Wars. I mean, how many times did he pop up, do you think?
Oh, he popped up quite frequently. He popped up in a lot of different skirmishes. I'll probably say at least I can count, probably see him maybe about 5 or 6 times.
Yeah, I mean, he was, and that's the thing. And a lot of times there's still a lot of casual fans, even people that watch the Clone Wars that, they're either looking at him going, I don't know, or they're like, this guy looks a little familiar, but I'm not sure who he is. And again, I mean, I have to admit, sometimes I forget his name. I'm like, oh yeah, that guy.
Yeah, Ronaldo even says, I find it interesting how long this guy lived. He even appeared in Aftermath.
Yeah. Well, and that's the cool thing, by the way, about Aftermath. Again, if you haven't read, I mean, I'm not going to turn this into another like book club commercial or anything like that. Although another book review, I'm sure as soon as Daryl and I could commit to reading the same book at the same time again, which only has happened one time.
Yep. And we actually finished roughly around the same time.
We did. We finished roughly around the same time, and it was kind of like, but I mean, the thing is that with our schedules, though, it's like, it's so hard to do. It'd almost be like if we started a book now, maybe a month or two from now, we might be able to do a thing on it. But that's the only reason why we haven't done a whole lot of book reviews, by the way. But yeah, if you haven't read the Aftermath trilogy, again, getting through the first book is a little bit difficult, only because it's written in a weird, I mean, it's difficult to describe, but it's written a little bit differently where it wasn't, I don't really want to say it was poorly written, but it wasn't really well written. It was kind of, I think it depends on your mood. But you're rewarded, number one, by a really good canon story, and the second book, Life, Debt, and then Empire's End, are really good. And yeah, I forgot that Embo actually appeared in these things. And then, of course, Ronaldo says, by the way, you can find Aura Singh during the pod race scene. If you blink, you miss it.
That's probably what happened.
Yeah, exactly. I think I did blink. But you know what?
That makes sense that she would be there, though.
Oh, Aura Singh?
Yeah, just because the bounty hunter being around Jabba, it makes sense.
Well, and especially since this is during Jabba's heyday. I mean, Jabba was pretty much at the zenith of his power. And it's kind of funny that, Ronaldo brings it up at that point, because my number 8, it happens to be Aura Singh.
Ah.
Yeah, you like that? I didn't even plan that. And it was funny.
Are in cahoots.
Right? I like almost paid him like, okay, man, at exactly this time I went, no, you know better than that.
No,
we
don't plan. We're just like Lucasfilm.
Exactly. We have no idea how long these things are going to run or anything like that. Every single time, especially with these Monday shows, we're all like, maybe we'll do like a 45 minute episode. It's like an hour and a half. I mean, it never fails. I mean, look at it now. We're already a half hour in. We're only at number 8. But Aura Singh, and by the way, on some of the ones that, like I said, we do double up on a few of these, it was interesting trying to come up with the different pictures. Because I'm like, man. And then every single time that we doubled up, which there's a lot of them where we don't, but I'd say like pretty close to half of them at least, we did double up. They're just in different spots in our countdown.
Right.
I'm just sitting there going,
especially
man.
When we get to like 5 and up, we probably got the same people.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And it's funny, too, because some of them were a little bit more, not necessarily obscure, but they would be choices that I would think that we might be tempted to stay away from. But then we ended up picking them, and I'm like, oh, no way. He picked this person, but he put him there, and I put him here. And again, it was kind of a struggle to come up with this countdown in a way. Number one, because at first, like I said, I was thinking, well, maybe this should be a top 5. I wonder if I can come up with 10 bounty hunters, because I started naming all the ones I know, and I'm like, oh, that's about it. And I might have like 6. But, as I started researching again and refamiliarizing myself, then it became difficult once I got my 10. And I'm sure you probably went through the same thing where it's like, okay, how are we going to rank these people?
Right.
So, if you stay tuned to after we reveal our number one pick, we're going to go into what our criteria was and how we did it. But yeah, I had to go with Aura Singh. Now I put her a little bit higher. I mean, like one spot. I put her at one spot higher than you did.
Okay.
But, that was only because, again, I think that she suffers from the same problem that a lot of them do, is that you get a little bit of glimpse into these characters, but you just don't have enough to really say, okay, can she take out some of the people we might have put higher on the list?
Mm-hmm.
And I have a feeling that, you were kind of saying the same thing, because you put her at number 9, I put her at number 8. We're pretty much at the same spot.
Yep.
And this happens to be our first duplication. But yeah, so it was good. So Aura Singh ends up being in the Padres. I'm gonna have to look for it now.
Yeah.
See, Ronaldo, if you want to be extra cool to us, you'll actually give us like the time code or something.
Don't tempt him.
Yeah, right. He's probably gonna, by the time we get to like number 2, he's like, okay, guys, here's the time code for when you can spot it. But I would be curious though, because they did put her in a live action situation like that. I wouldn't mind checking it out. Because after all, she looks totally cool. I mean, I have to admit, part of the reason why I put her on here was just because she looks really cool.
Definitely.
And again, this is the kind of thing, when people are talking about strong female characters and stuff like that, unfortunately, it's limited to like your Princess Leia's and Padme's and Rey and
Jyn Erso.
Yeah, Jyn Erso and stuff like that. But I mean, when you really stop and look at some of the female villains, I mean, they were pretty formidable and powerful.
Oh, yeah.
And Aura Singh is no joke, man. I mean, if you actually watch her in the Clone Wars, it's insane. She's like taking out all these people and stuff like that. And she's basically the leader of the group of other bounty hunters that you would think would be the ones that would be more in charge.
Right.
And when it came to Solo: A Star Wars Story, when Beckett, they were mentioning how Beckett killed her, it seemed like it was a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh man, you're the one that killed Aura Singh kind of thing, So, I mean, I don't know. To me, that just spoke volumes about, her power and her character. All right. Who's your number 7?
My number 7 goes to the Mandalorian himself, Din Djarin.
Yes.
Yep. Good old Din Djarin. I have him, at number 7. Just because if you follow, Eric and I, when we first started watching The Mandalorian, one of the things that we always kind of complained about was the fact like we thought he was going to be a little bit more powerful than, what they portrayed him to be. Now,
yeah,
granted,
definitely.
he has improved, or they've improved him, as far as, I mean, granted, we only in season 2, but but I just think that, we were looking at some of the things and we're like, okay, well, he seems to get his butt kicked, a little bit too much in our opinion. But one thing I can say is that he is, he's very crafty. I think he's around a time where just the look of a Mandalorian is just kind of like off-putting to people, because probably the last one they saw was maybe Boba Fett. So he's still down here. And I know people are like, well, why did you put like Embo, below Din Djarin? And I know I wanted to switch these two, honestly.
So this is one of the ones that you were thinking like,
yeah,
oh man, you know what?
I probably should have flip-flopped these two.
Maybe I should have put in, looking at Din's track record here, maybe Embo should have gone a little bit higher.
But then what made me stop it and leave him here was the battle that he had with Ahsoka. And the fact that, he was actually able to withstand her barrage coming from someone as powerful as she was, and he wasn't afraid, and he just kind of, he handled it, and he kind of gave her a run for her money a little bit. And I thought that was pretty cool. because you definitely saw the growth of him from season 1.
Yeah, I
And
would
so
say
that
definitely, absolutely. I mean, if you look at the last 3 or so episodes
mhm.
of season 2 of The Mandalorian, I mean, he stepped it up quite a bit.
Yeah, and especially when he and Boba Fett were teaming up with each other, you just saw like his accuracy as far as him shooting and just everything like that. Um, the whole crate dragon situation, when he just exploded out of that thing, and it's just like you need that fearlessness in a bounty hunter. You need um, that tenaciousness, and he really he has that. But I still don't think that he's strong enough, at least at this point, for what we've seen, to put him up in the upper echelon of bounty hunters.
No, I totally agree. And in fact, one of the things that I remember when they showed Boba Fett taking out those stormtroopers,
Yeah, that
I'm
shows
like,
you
now
that.
that's the Mandalorian.
Mhm.
That right there is the Mandalorian.
Yes, sir.
I mean, and that just goes to show you. But again, I mean, I think that what's cool about it though is that if they made him too much like Boba Fett and they made him like really super powerful, it might have been kind of cliche. What's cool about Din's character is the fact that there's a certain vulnerability there.
Mhm.
And there's a certain, like, you don't know if he's going to get out of this or somebody has to help him. And again, I thought that I agree with you. I think that they overdid that a little bit in the first season.
Yeah, I mean, and you make a good point, as far as like making him too good, almost like a Boba Fett. Because if you got to think about it, um, it's kind of like us guys we have these arguments about like basketball players, right? And everybody's like, oh well, LeBron James is the greatest basketball player, and everybody's like, but he's not better than Michael Jordan or anything. But you have to look at the time and who they are going up against, and it's like when you look at somebody like Boba Fett and all those guys, like they've been around Jedi. They've been around all this stuff and higher end criminals, and you got people who have really real abilities that can do stuff. Whereas right now, as far as what we know, he's not even heard of a Jedi. You see what I'm saying? So
Yeah,
that's the
absolutely.
difference between why they're able to. And then you still hear, Boba Fett's around with Vader, and so you have this whole installation of military and everything like that. I mean, it's a whole different ball game, where those guys come from.
Well, you can just tell that the difference between the way Boba Fett carries himself and the way that Din carries himself is that Boba Fett has obviously been through some stuff.
Yep.
And I mean, and even Ronaldo points out, we still haven't seen the full story of Din Djarin yet. We still have a lot to learn about him.
Absolutely.
But even though that's the case, I still think that, Daryl, you're absolutely 100% correct in the sense of, but what we do know about him, though, is what we're judging him on.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, yes, there's a lot that we have to learn and everything else. And again, don't get me wrong, he did make a serious jump as far as skill. Like, he's a little bit more in season 2, like I think we expected him to be in season 1.
Right. Exactly.
And I mean, I think that that's the thing that you have to look at and that, you definitely can't ignore. All right, so
Right. Who you got, man?
who do I got? I have, of course, the mighty Dengar.
Dengar.
Yes, Dengar. Take a good look at this guy. He basically is this guy that always fascinated me from like the time that I was started collecting action figures, right? Which is pretty much the day I saw Star Wars. I mean, as soon as, my dad took me to see it because he had to go see it first because he was in the habit, which was, very good parenting. It's nice. Both my parents actually insisted on if there was a movie they knew I was going to want to see, they would go see it first, make sure it was cool. So he went, I think, with my aunt and uncle or something to see Star Wars. And then, of course, he was kind of blown away by it. So he was like, oh, yeah, not only is it okay, but he has to see this movie. And I was like 6 years old. He takes me to the theater. And as soon as the theater's over, we immediately went to Toys R Us, and I got to get one figure, which ended up being C-3PO, because that's all they had. They were sold out of everything else, you know. I mean, they
Mhm.
had a couple, I think they had like maybe like Snaggletooth or, I mean, it was pretty much if you ever saw the Jingle All the Way movie, it was pretty much like getting Booster. Like that was pretty much all you had. But 3PO was cool because he had that whole like golden kind of thing and he looked cool. Like, he didn't look like a lot of the other droids did. Dengar was another one of those characters for me where as soon as I saw him, I was intrigued by him. And he's another one of those guys. Again, a lot of Star Wars purists, like the really super hardcore fans, would probably argue with me about putting him so low on the list. Because he's actually a really powerful guy. Like he would hang around with IG-88 a lot. And, if you read a lot of the, really the expanded universe books, because we really haven't seen him pop up too much in the new canon since Disney took over. I mean, I think maybe a couple of the issues around Empire Strikes Back. So maybe like some of the general Star Wars comics or a couple of the Vader ones that take place around the whole Empire Strikes Back time period. Yeah, I just think that he's still powerful enough, though, that he warrants being placed on this list because, again, all we had to go on is the expanded universe. But if you go by that, I mean, this guy is like, he's ruthless. I mean, I think that that's one of the things, too. He is one of the most ruthless bounty hunters in all of Star Wars.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, he definitely ranks up there. Man, I know, like I said, the company he keeps is very ruthless. IG-88, Bosk, like all those guys, even Aura Singh, like she was around them. They kind of had their own little band at one point.
I mean, look at the look on his, not me. I'm pointing past me, although the look I have on my face is one of shock.
It's probably like
surprise,
as if he ran up on you.
He did, exactly. It's a perfect little still that I ended up choosing that I probably would have re-chosen had I actually been looking. But yeah, he looks evil, he looks tough. And in some of the comics and books and things like that he has been featured, I mean, he's been intriguing. I actually wish that they would make more content with him, in it. Now, Ronaldo says Dengar appears in Rise of Skywalker with various modifications. He literally looks like a monster. I kind of remember that because I remember that was a thing. And actually, what's funny is he appears in Rebels, I think, too. I don't remember if he's in Clone Wars or not, but I think he's in Rebels, and he definitely has like an altered appearance. Because there was something that, like I said, he hasn't been in too much of the Disney canon stuff, but when they do feature him, it was significant. And I think he went through some changes or something like that. Like, he doesn't look as weird as he does here in the animation. But then in the Rise of Skywalker, yeah, I'd forgotten that.
my good friend Dwight is back, and he says Aura Singh's appears at 1 hour 1 minute and 8 seconds. Yep.
Nice.
And he says, "Evening, everyone." Ronaldo said, "Hey, Dwight."
Oh, that's just too funny, man.
That's Professor X, man. That's why I love him.
Well, I mean, hey, you know what? That's really cool because now I'm gonna have to check it out.
Yep.
All right, so you ready to give your number 6?
Yeah, let's roll with it.
All right, number 6.
Good old Bosk. Yeah. So as you were talking about, being ruthless, and if that's totally the reason why I picked Bosk at this point. Bosk is super, tenacious. I mean, he's just in that episode of Clone Wars when they were hunting Ahsoka and the rest of the like Padawans, because they knew they couldn't best Jedi Knight, so they knew they had to go get Padawans. And
which, if you think about it, is kind of a wuss move.
I mean, yeah, but I think it's just it is.
I mean, I don't know. I just think that my ego would take a little bit of a hit
Yeah, it's like fighting a girl or something like that.
Yeah.
Like,
Even though truthfully, there's probably some girls that could totally take me out. I know on your end though,
yeah.
you keep
Hey,
you
hey,
keep
hey.
do you still insist that there's nobody
I can't let it happen, man. I'm like 3POs against my makeup. But
I don't know, man. I'm thinking our girl Gina.
I would love to try that though.
I mean, well, I mean, I understand that would be kind of a mixed thing for you, but
Literally.
I'm just thinking it probably because
Hey, we
she's got the
MMA training in there. Yeah, we can. Hey, gym's open. Let's go.
so Bosk.
Yes, Bosk. Bosk is cool because, like I said, he's ruthless. He's one of the most feared bounty hunters in the galaxy because of his ruthlessness. The only reason why I have him this low, though, is because his intellect isn't where it needs to be. That's the problem with Bosk. He's kind of like a Doberman Pinscher instead of a German Shepherd. Where
That's a good analogy.
you send him to go and he's going to go 100 miles an hour and he's not thinking about like how things are going to impact certain things. But what makes him so good is because of his senses that he has based upon his race, or so he can smell and he's a good tracker. So you really can't really hide from him too long because he can pick up your scent, and not only that, but he's really fast. And that's the other thing about him. So, Bosk ranks as my number 6.
Well, I mean, that's a good pick. And this is, again, now we're basically at the point of the countdown where we're, like 6, 5, and even 4. I mean, it's kind of in the middle, right?
Mm-hmm.
So these guys are better than some of the other ones. And again, I mean, I get it because Bosk is another one of those characters that as much as we've seen him, we still haven't seen a whole lot of him.
Right.
And so it's a little difficult to really gauge him.
Him particularly, but what you can say is that based on other bounty hunters of his race, some of his capabilities and qualities just based upon the actual race of the character. Now, Bosk in of it himself has his own little adaptations or quirks that makes him unique. But even just looking at, like I said, that particular episode of Clone Wars, even his race popped up in The Mandalorian when they were trying to come after.
I was just about to say that. And then, of course, Din ends up fighting the one guy. And I mean, I remember when I was seeing that, like pictures and then I think they even showed it in one of the like trailers or something.
Mm-hmm.
And I was so hoping that was Bosk. I'm like, okay, if you're not going to give me Boba Fett, at least give me Bosk. But I have to admit, Din's kind of won me over.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it didn't take me very long into the whole series to where I was kind of like, you know what? I actually really like this character. Of course, then, they introduce Boba Fett, and you're like, oh, man. So Ronaldo says, I really like Bosk, and I think he's one of the characters that has benefit the most from additional material.
Definitely.
Yeah, I could agree with that because he's another one of those guys that, you see him in The Empire Strikes Back, and you're like, who's this guy?
Mm-hmm.
I want to check him out. So my number 6, we're going to start to see now, I think, the appearance of, we're going to get into some more popular type characters here. So my number 6 is Jango Fett.
Ah.
Yes, the father.
The father.
So again, Jango's another one of those guys, though, that even though he's familiar and a lot of people know who he is, I can't help but think that he's underappreciated.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of times I think people don't really see him as the truly powerful bounty hunter that he is.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. He is super powerful. And I think that, a lot of people do underestimate him just because you have, Boba Fett, and everybody's just kind of in love with Boba Fett. So
well, that's it.
I think
Boba
the son
Fett
kind of
overshadows
him. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, if you think about it, it's basically Django who not only is Boba essentially a clone of this guy, but also emotionally, what set Boba on his journey is the death of Django.
Yeah.
And seeing that. And of course, seeing a Jedi killing him, I think made it even more like, okay, now he wants to get revenge, particularly on Mace Windu, which is a really cool story arc in the Clone Wars cartoon or animated series. Everybody hates it if you say cartoon, right?
Right.
But Django's one of those guys that, again, he was really prominent in Attack of the Clones, but that's really the only place that we got to see him. And that's, again, a lot of times people are like, okay, you're going on and on about how powerful this guy is, so how come he's not like number 1 or 2 or 3 or whatever? And the answer is because I was trying to really temper this by going, okay, you have to look at some of this stuff, but you also have to look at how much material is on this guy. You know, and you can make the argument like, look, they based the entire clone army on this person. So obviously he's a little bit powerful. You know, I mean, think about this. If you're going to base the entire clone army on one person, think about what you would have to go through to actually pick the person, right? You're going to try to pick the most powerful guy and that has the attributes that you want. But again, for me, a lot of the other guys would just be able to take Django out. On my list, at least.
Okay.
I'm pretty confident.
Oh, okay. I want to argue with you on that one.
I'm just saying. All right, so now we're about to hit the midway point. That's right. You guys have seen, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. Now we're about to hit the top 5. So kick us off. Who's your number 5?
Number 5 goes to Mr. IG-88.
Yes.
IG-88, man, this thing is a bad mofo, man. I mean, just because, you know, from the time that they actually activated him, he killed everybody in the lab. That's how crazy this thing is. And he actually loves to kill. Like, I mean, I know that's what he's kind of programmed to do, but he really, like, if he had a heart, that's what would pump through his veins, is just kill. And he does it very, very well. We've seen models like him even in the in Mandalorian, like season 1, where, you know, now you can see what this thing can do. It can spin around and it has all these, like, you can't even sneak up behind this stupid thing, you know, because it has so many sensors and it reacts so quickly to danger. You know, it's really formidable, and it just comes at you just 100 miles an hour. It's just full speed ahead, guns ablazing, and the fact that it's kind of like if you put blasters in the hands of General Grievous, because things got like multiple arms and it can do all these different things, much like Grievous did with lightsabers.
Yeah, I mean, Grievous kind of reminded me sort of like an IG series thing. And, you know, before I get to my comment on it, let me just sneak in this one that Ronaldo has about Django. He says, it's funny to think that we wouldn't have clone troopers, stormtroopers, or Boba Fett without Django.
Exactly.
And that certainly makes a case for it. But now, turning to IG-88, I think one of the things that's interesting about this particular character is that, again, other than him standing in the background and looking extremely cool in The Empire Strikes Back, we knew nothing about this guy or droid. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Until it was either Tales of Mos Eisley or Tales of Bounty Hunters or something like that. It's the same book, actually, that that had Boba Fett escaping from the Sarlacc pit in the expanded universe. You got a little bit of IG-88 story. And, you know, he was just another one of those droids that was extremely ruthless. Like you said, programmed to kill. Actually, as much as a droid can anyway, seemed to enjoy the process. He kind of, it almost seemed like, attitude-wise, they modeled HK-47 from Knights of the Old Republic after this guy.
Yep.
And, you know, he's just so efficient at it, too.
Yeah, that's the other thing. He's so efficient.
And I think it's fair actually to put him here. I mean, and again, this list is so subjective, and of course I'm going to call for this at the end of the show, but I can say this now that we're kind of at the midway point of the show, right? If you guys like what you guys are seeing, if you want to see more content and you want to participate more, be sure to subscribe to this channel, hit the notification bell so you know when we come out with new videos. Of course, we do stream live every Monday and Friday at 8. Our Monday show is a little bit looser and more informal than our Friday show. We just kind of talk about whatever. But one of the other things that I will say, though, is that IG-88, even though he's pretty powerful, I still think that, once again, he suffers from that whole thing that there's still not much. Because think about it. You get a lot of what IG-88 can do because of IG-11.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's somewhat of a problem because IG-11, even though he's the same model or, well,
style,
same series of droid,
Yeah.
he's an IG series droid, he's definitely different than IG-88. And so you can't totally base everything on that.
True.
So I mean, I just think that that's one of the dangers of going too much. But I mean, it's the same thing, right? The Rodians and Greedo. It's kind of like, okay, you understand how Greedo is based on what other people of his race are capable of. Same thing with Bossk. You brought that up too, where it's kind of like, well, we see some of these other guys, and now we know a little bit about Bossk, and plus a lot of it is context. And I know that that's a lot about when you were coming up with your list, that it's like, look, we might not have a whole lot of information about a particular bounty hunter, but if you look at how other people are reacting to him or her, and you see kind of, not just how people are reacting, but how they treat them, the company that they're keeping, things like that, it says a lot about the character. And I personally think that that's one of the cool things about Star Wars is the fact that you could get that nuanced. Or a lot of series you can.
True. Very true. Who
All
do you
right.
have for 5?
So who do I have for number 5? Oh, let's just let this simmer for a second.
Oh, really?
Well, oddly enough, my number 5 is your number 7, Mr. Din Djarin.
Ah, okay.
So now,
It's a cool picture too.
yeah, well, that was the thing, I always have to go for the. Once again, whenever we would double up on these guys, it's like, oh man, I got to try to come up with another picture of this guy. And I'll tell you something, the IG-88 one, when I just had to come up with one of those, it was like, there's no real pictures of IG-88 laying around.
Mm-hmm.
Any other character, there's like a ton of them, right? And even though there's a lot of Din as well, they're the same stupid pictures that everybody sees. And, how many times have we featured? We've done Mandalorian reviews. We've done the trailer stuff. We've done discussions on it. It's like, okay, as much as we're trying to be creative here, I've reused this like 1 or 2 pictures so many times that I'm like, I got to find some different things. And I saw this one and I'm like, okay, this is actually pretty cool. But one would wonder, after everything that I said when you introduced him as your number 7, well, why on earth would I put him at number 5? And the answer is actually very simple because, again, I think part of what you have to do is you can't just go by a ranking based on, skill. This isn't like a RPG type of game where it's kind of like, okay, here's a list of all the attributes. You have to also understand how are these guys interacting with the world around them and things like that. And then how much do we know about the character? How much growth do they have? Things of that nature. And what's their potential? Because as Ronaldo pointed out, we still don't know all of Din's story yet. Now, like I said, when you brought him up as number 7, we know enough to base certain things, right? So it's kind of like, okay, this guy's getting his butt kicked a little bit too much to be the Mandalorian, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then you realize that what we're actually seeing is this guy who was once a lost child saved by the Mandalorians and became a foundling, and we learned what that meant. And it's like now it's like, you know what? We're seeing that this guy was once a scared little kid during the Clone Wars, and look at what he's becoming. And we're seeing that journey. And that's why I think that what we see in season 2 is a vast improvement over what he was in season 1. And so for that reason, for me, I had to put him dead in the middle, because is he going to take out Black Chrysanthemum? Probably not. But again, I don't know enough about that character, though.
Mm-hmm.
Other than, just having him on my list. I mean, he was like, what, number 9?
Yeah.
So,
well, with that flamethrower, you set his fur on fire. I mean, that's it.
yeah. Well, and the thing is that much like what you had said, because one of the things that when we're doubling up on some of these people, it's like, okay, I have to try to, and I know you're doing the same thing too, where it's kind of like, although you don't know my list, I actually know your list. Mm-hmm. I kind of have it in front of me, so it's it's a little bit of a disadvantage, but I'm also trying to temper it, because in the times where we do have doubles, there's still different things to say, because why did you pick like Din and why did I pick Din? Somewhat same reasons, somewhat different reasons. You guys that are watching this right now, you're going to feel the same way. I mean, besides yelling and swearing at the TV about how we're crazy and, how could you guys even, like, the comments are going to be something along the lines of, how could you leave off? And then there'll be a list, right? And then if not, the next whole phase of it's going to be, okay, why is this guy number whatever? They should have been this, or they shouldn't have even been on the list, or something like that. That's part of the fun of doing these lists.
Yep.
And certainly we invite you guys, which is actually the point I was going to make along with the subscription thing. We invite you guys to put your own top 10 list of bounty hunters in the comments section. Because there's nothing better than actually seeing what everybody's thinking and why, because you get more of an appreciation for these characters that way. And one of the things that happened with me when I was coming up with this list, and I'm sure you're doing the same thing, is it really made you think about these characters more.
Yeah, definitely.
I just think that, like, I really had to stop and think, like, okay, who am I going to put at number 10? Who am I going to put at number 9? And so on and so forth. And why? Why are they there? It would be really easy to come up just random because, as long as you put some of the more popular ones in the top 3, let's say, it's like most people aren't even going to know. Like, I'll bet you a lot of the casual fans don't even know who half of these characters on our list is. Big points if you know who Black Chrysanthemum is, or Embo. It's like most people don't even know.
Right. Even Dwight said it's all enjoyment to me. I only know a few.
Yeah, well, and that's it. It's one of those things where these kinds of things are fun to do, but you do get these people that, and I learn from them that way too. I mean, it deepens the enjoyment of the saga. Like, I'll get people, Jason's actually a really good example, right? He'll comment some stuff. Most of the time, I have to say that I agree with a lot of his insights, right? But there's times where he'll post something and I never really thought about it before. I'm like, well, you know what? I never really thought about it like that. Maybe that's true. And it really helps to understand, or people bring up characters. Ronaldo does it a lot. Dwight, you do it sometimes too. I mean, everybody that contributes to the chat always usually tends to bring up something where we didn't know. And I mean, thank goodness too, because how many times are you and I going, oh yeah, what was that guy again or whatever, and somebody chats it in. It's like, yeah, that's it. Like Aura Singh being in the Phantom Menace, for instance.
Exactly. At 1 hour, 1 minute, and 8 seconds.
Yes. But I mean, I just had to put Din in there because, number one, we know enough about him that I think he warrants a high place in the countdown. On the other hand, again, as Ronaldo had pointed out earlier, there's so much that we don't know that I wouldn't want to put him any higher. And I don't really think that skill-wise you could. I mean, like I said, you could argue that some of the people that we have in the bottom 5 could probably take him out. And I think that maybe, you remember how you said you might have rethought some things? I might have maybe put Din closer to where you put him if I were going to do it again.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. I think I could still go for, I think I could still safely kind of put him in number 5. All right. So who's your number 4?
Number 4 is good old Boba Fett.
Yes, Boba Fett.
So I have where? So, and the reason why Boba's at 4 is because the other ones are at 3, 2, and 1. No, but
that's exactly. I was gonna say because you already. But I understand where you're going with this because
it's partially true though. But I mean, like Boba Fett once again, like we haven't really seen. We know him by reputation. We know that Boba Fett has a tremendous resume, and even so much to the point that Vader specifically pointed him out when he said no disintegration. Like he's like us once again, Boba Fett's reputation precedes him. And then out of all the bounty hunters that were actually charged with finding the Falcon and everything like that, Boba Fett was the one to actually do it. In fact, and that's the reason why IG-88 is where he was, is because Boba Fett actually destroyed IG-88 on the way to Bespin. When he got to Bespin, he destroyed IG-88 for actually tailing Boba Fett and was trying to, get in on the bounty. So once again, Boba Fett being super crafty, super powerful. We see it, especially now watching Mandalorian season 2. Even without his weapons, I mean, he had a gaffy stick. I mean, he was just going to town on everybody. But then when you saw him, when he finally got his armor back, yeah, that's Boba Fett. And that's the reason why he was like one of the most feared bounty hunters in the galaxy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
he is feared.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why I would say, like, when you look at the top guys, the upper echelon of what are you talking about? Jedi, Sith, smugglers, crime bosses, or crime lords. People who are at the top because either you're competing with them at some point, or you actually are trying to do business with them. So all the people like big manufacturing companies know other CEOs of other manufacturing companies or Apple or things like that. Why? Because we all run in the same kind of circle. So when you look at Boba Fett, he's at the upper echelon of a bounty hunter, and that's just because the wife says if Boba Fett is not number 1, is it the Mad Hatter? It's hilarious. So yeah, but I just think that Boba Fett is just a tremendous asset, and when it comes to being a bounty hunter, you almost can't find not too many people better than him, except for the ones I have ahead of him. So I think this was just as far as Boba could go for me.
I can see that, and it's true. There's a lot of people that would put him, higher, right? Mm-hmm. And then, of course, Ronaldo points out, I think Boba Fett has taken higher spots on everyone's list thanks to The Mandalorian. And that's a good point, is that
true.
The Mandalorian is really what has given a lot of depth to his character. But I will say, well, before I say this, I should clarify, too, that remember, this is our list of top 10 favorite bounty hunters.
Mm-hmm.
So before anybody out there starts going psycho on like, how could you say that this is higher than this? It's favorite. It's true. Some of this is based on, where they fall in, right, skill and stuff like that. But I mean, in a lot of cases, it's our favorite ones. And why are they our favorite ones?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that Ronaldo is correct in the sense of The Mandalorian really elevated Boba Fett's story quite a bit. In fact, it gave us one, because if you think about it, all we've had from this guy in Empire Strikes Back, he has like a couple of lines.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, let's face it, he just looks really cool. That was pretty much it. We first were introduced to him in the holiday special, for better or for worse. Actually, that was the thing. And I remember when we were doing the whole reaction video to the holiday special, we're like, you know what? This whole little animated thing, if they just expanded that and made that the holiday special, it would have been legendary.
Mm-hmm.
because it was cool. And there was a lot of dialogue in there from Boba Fett. But then when we got into the movies, it was kind of like, well, I don't know. This guy, he looks awesome. He seems menacing, but sometimes less is more. Sometimes, you could say more by saying less.
It's the mystery.
Yeah, I mean, some may even argue that we can learn from our own statement. Like, oh, Mr. 3 hour, shows is going to tell us about how less is more. But in a lot of cases, though, with these characters, it is. But that said, a lot of people thought that they kind of made Boba Fett go out like a punk. And they did. It was kind of slapstick comedy sort of thing. And everybody was really disappointed about how he died. And then, of course, in the expanded universe, they had brought him back, which was then decanonized. But now, we still don't know how he escaped the Sarlacc pit. But the point is that Boba Fett definitely has been expanded as far as a character goes and given a lot more depth. So,
and he might move up because once we see the book of Boba Fett, that might change.
Well, and I was going to say, yeah, I mean, just like Ronaldo said that Din's story is not over, neither is Boba's.
Exactly.
Because, I mean, we're seeing like another whole level of things going on. So, all right, so your number 4 is Boba Fett.
Yeah, who you got?
My number 4 is actually your number 5, and that is Mr. IG-88. See his picture here, right?
Yep.
I had to make this.
Yeah, I could tell.
I tried to get the lighting right, but yeah, I had to make it because it was like, okay, there's really nothing, nothing that had him, and it was just like a bunch of characters around him or something like that. And I kind of blew the whole like really good picture on your choice. So
appreciate your efforts.
Well, thank you. But again, going back to why I picked IG-88, why he's one of my favorites, I have to say that how these characters look definitely does, to a certain degree, influence the, whether or not, or I should say where they fall in my list of favorite whatever characters, right? So IG-88, I remember, because you got to remember, I was like 9 years old when Empire Strikes Back came out. And seeing the bounty hunters was one of the coolest things, because if you think about it, the stormtroopers look really cool. Of course, Vader looked amazing. The droids look cool, but you really didn't see a whole lot beyond some of the Empire and then, of course, a lot of the human characters. He had a lot of really interesting droids, and he had Wookiees and stuff like that, but you never really had any of the other stuff until Empire Strikes Back, and you had this whole plethora of bounty hunters. And IG-88, for me, and I know you put him at number 5. I put him at number 4. So why do you think, what was it about IG-88 where you didn't put him higher? I don't know if you actually pointed that out when you gave your explanation.
The reason why I didn't put IG-88 higher, 2 reasons that kind of go together. One, I don't think he's, once again, being ruthless as a bounty hunter is good, but I don't think he's as intelligent. See, that's the problem about being a droid, is that, you're kind of limited to your programming, which, depending on what that is, it could be really vast or very limited. But, with the free thinking mind, you're kind of trained to adapt and just assess situations differently. And sometimes you don't respond as well. You respond better as a human than you would a droid. And it's considering the fact that Boba Fett actually killed IG-88. So by that, it's kind of like, well, I've already bested you.
But IG-88 looks cool.
He looks cool. Don't get me wrong. But I still think Boba Fett looks cooler.
You know what it is? And speaking of Boba Fett, getting back to Dwight. Well, I mean, before that, Dwight was like, his look was supposed to be an elite stormtrooper initially. And that's true. Yep. I remember hearing about that a while ago. And in fact, somebody, if you Google search this, I don't know, I think I saw it on Facebook or something, but somebody actually created like this black Mandalorian helmet with like kind of a red sort of tinted slit.
Yeah.
And it kind of looks like it sort of looks like a Mandalorian cross with like a Dark Trooper.
That and Kylo Ren.
Yeah, exactly. So that was cool. And then of course we had the man himself, Boba Fett.
Yes, he's
Says,
come to
"Yo,
joy. Oh,
a man of few
a
words.
few words. Yep.
A few words."
Ronaldo says, "Hi, Boba. We just talked about you." And of course, in typical Boba Fett, I'm not here to talk. I'm here. I can bring you in warm, or I can bring you in cold.
Well, that's more Din though.
Yeah,
It's kind of ripping off Din's thing a little bit, but
maybe
for
that's a bounty
IG
hunter thing. It's like
Well,
ever
for-
dance with the devil by the pale moonlight. You know.
that is still one of the cooler lines.
Oh, I love that line.
I love that whole movie. I mean, if you really, I mean, not, of course, now we get off into this whole Batman tangent, but sometimes, and this plays into this too, it's the lines that some of these people deliver. Because if you look at Boba Fett, he just kind of had this swagger almost,
Mhm.
and just like nothing really bothered him. He was just totally cool. Like, yeah, I mean, he was one of those guys that he's facing Vader. He's got no fear.
I was just about to say that's one of my favorite things about Boba Fett is the fact that he's like bouncing back with Vader, and he knows who Vader is, but he's still like, look, he's not worth, if he's dead, he's not worth anything to me.
Right. Now, and again, this brings me to a point about IG-88, my number 4.
Your guy.
My guy, which a lot of this, I have to admit, comes from the fact that I had read a lot of the Expanded Universe books, and that's where you get a little bit more of a story on some of these guys like IG-88. And they haven't really pulled too much into the new canon other than, some of the stuff that we had mentioned when we were talking about when IG-88 was your choice, which, because you just put him at number 5. So we were pretty much right there with IG-88 too.
Mm-hmm.
So I just think that overall, it's really hard because now once you're getting into the top 5, it's really tough, man. I mean, because pretty much, honestly, if I'm being 100% honest, my list of top bounty hunters could change. I mean, pretty much the same guys are probably going to be on there. Because, there's another bounty hunter like Zam Wessel, remember?
Mm-hmm.
I just really didn't like Zam Wessel.
Yeah.
Yet, Zam was apparently extremely skilled, powerful, and all that stuff. Like, I was reading some stuff not too long ago.
Yeah, being a shapeshifter would definitely come in handy.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. The character just never really appealed to me, though. And so, therefore, Zam never really, I don't know, just didn't appear on any of the lists. But for a lot of these guys, again, they could just shift a lot. So IG-88 sometimes can get as high as maybe number 2 or 3 for me. But I don't know. It's kind of tough. All right. So you're number 3.
Number 3. Old Papa Fett. Good old Django.
Yeah, so now you put Django a little bit higher than I did.
Yeah, so I put Django higher because one, you get to see, especially Attack of the Clones, how he's able to go against Jedi, and the fact that he's not afraid, and he even bested Obi-Wan, who was pretty powerful, and that's kind of one of the things that, and like you, for all the other reasons that you said, being, he's the one that basically the Emperor signed off on, saying that, yeah, I want this guy to be, the prototype for my army, because at the time Jango Fett was probably the best bounty hunter roughly around that time period. So, yeah,
Boba says Papa.
yeah, my condolences.
Yeah, right. It's a good thing we're not, if we had Mace Windu on there, it would really set him off.
Yeah, we don't want to get ahead of ourselves. Anyway, anywho, so
well, thanks for joining us tonight. Hey, this is great. You got Jango Fett and you're doing the dad jokes.
Oh, but yeah, like Jango Fett.
As I'm watching like our viewers plummet all of a sudden. Like, all right, that's it. I'm out.
But no, Jango Fett is really cool. I mean, he's really truly a gunslinger. I mean, he kind of has that vibe when you see him, like, when he shot that one monster that was in the Coliseum. He shoots him between the eyes, and then he like does a whole RoboCop thing where he's spinning the gun and then he drops it in this holster. I mean, he definitely has that swagger that I think Boba Fett eventually picked up on, but he's once again just super. He's powerful. He's smart. He's cunning. Just outbesting Jedi, and he kind of likes it as a challenge. That's a challenge for him, and he kind of gets off on that type of thing. And so, like I said, if you're going to base an army off anybody, and this is the guy that you pick, yeah, you definitely got to have him higher than Boba, in my opinion.
See, now I almost went there, but the only problem that I have is that even though Jango is basically the original, and don't get me wrong, he did some cool stuff, and I pointed all that stuff out when you had him on your list. Or no, I'm sorry, this is you.
Yeah.
When I had him at number 6, mostly because I think that you have to remember that Boba's a clone of him. So Boba essentially is Jango. But I think that Boba eclipses Jango in just about every way. And I just think that Boba's the better version of the character. Even though all the other stuff, I admit is true. I brought all that stuff up, before, but it was one of those things that I think that Boba and Jango are kind of the same. And just Boba just is a little bit more compelling the way that he was done. But I mean, obviously, I can't argue with putting Jango at 3 either.
Well, only because, like I said, the main thing for me for that particular position was the fact that, like I said, he's going against Jedi, which we've never seen Boba do, and we know how powerful Jedi can be.
But you have to remember that Boba actually did go up against some. A lot of it was off screen, though. That's true. And then, of course, Boba has that infamous Wookiee pelt collection. That he would chop off like a little. And then, of course, he also had the little braids from the Padawans, too. I know Jango did that, too. I mean, it's like, see, that's what I'm saying. It's like they're kind of interchangeable characters in a lot of ways. And you just have to get down with, like, who's the most interesting. But again, it's one of those things that you can't really argue either way, because there's a lot of compelling reasons to put Jango really high in the list, as you've done. The only reason why I didn't, and again, I mean, for me, I even put Din higher than him. I put, obviously, I had put IG-88 higher than him. So it's kind of like one of those deals where maybe if I were to do this list in a couple of weeks, I might change it.
True.
I don't know. But
who do you have?
So who do I have as number 3?
Yeah, man.
Bossk.
Ah, Bossk.
I have Bossk as number 3.
Okay.
So again, you're kind of
over Jango, huh? And
yeah. I mean, that's the thing.
All right, I gotta hear this.
And yes, I know. Okay, he's unintelligent. All these reasons why you said you didn't put him. I mean, it's so funny too, because when I'm listening to you going, well, I was gonna put him higher, but here's all the things that are kind of crappy about this guy, and I'm sitting there going, crappy's like my number 3. He looks really cool, but Bossk, he was one of those guys that, as soon as Empire Strikes Back came out, I went out and I bought the action figure. Because again, it sounds like, oh, he looks cool. Yeah, he's like the lizard guy. Go ahead but it's not just that. There's something compelling about him. Whenever he would appear in anything, and especially I was really happy when he appeared in the Clone Wars, and then, he would just be in all this other, he would just pop up in these weird places. And again, even though Bossk wasn't officially in The Mandalorian, his species was, there's just something really compelling to me and interesting about this character. And that's where, again, I have to say, I look beyond just the attributes. Just okay, what's his skill level? What's his intellect? What's, all this other stuff. A lot of it has to do with the fact of how interesting of a character are they to me. Because, again, this is coming down to our favorites. This isn't just like, okay, who's the top 10 best bounty hunters?
Right.
because I mean that's the case, Black Chrysanthemum's probably going to be a lot higher on the list.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of the stuff, and we'll get into it a little bit later after we reveal our number one, but a lot of it for Bossk, he's always been kind of a fascinating character to me. He even popped up in what was that? I mean, he's been in Battlefront 2 and some things like that, but there's some other series or something. I don't remember what it was, but he interacted. It was probably like a cutscene from a game or something, but he was interacting with some character, and I just thought, like, wow, I want to see more of this.
Dwight, we got a couple of comments.
He said, I know. I'm reading some of these.
Jango defended the Republic and tried to kill one of their leaders, Padme. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And then Boba Fett says, "You put that lizard before my father."
Hey, that lizard was your friend.
That's true.
Ronaldo says, "I think Boba is coming for you, Eric." And then Boba's like, his bounty just went up a couple hundred. Only a couple hundred?
Hey, man, at least, it's more than people usually pay for you, so.
All right. I see how this is going to be. But yeah, I mean, it's just, it's kind of a compelling, character-driven kind of thing for me. I'm a little bit more about that sometimes. And sometimes I can't even explain it. Like certain characters will just hit me where they fascinate me, and I don't get why that is, but Bossk was always one of those guys for me. He's different than anybody that you see, really. Well, I mean, until they introduce the entire race of them, obviously, but as a character, Bossk was a little bit different from any of the other ones that we had seen before. And so I think that's, that just warranted putting him a little bit higher on the list. But you're right, though, in the sense of if you wanted to go after me on this, you could, because by my own definition, it's not like we have a whole lot of character development or story or anything about him either.
Right.
I mean, we really don't know as much. I mean, granted, we probably know more about him than some of these other people on the list, but not much more, though. I mean, unlike Boba Fett, he didn't even really have any lines.
Right.
I mean, I remember it was in the Clone Wars, I think, that we first actually heard him speak. And he had that whole, snake type S thing going. So it was kind of crazy. All right, so now we're at the top two.
Yes.
All right, lay on your number two.
Well, I'm a gentleman, so I'm always say ladies first. I'm going with Asajj Ventress.
Yeah, this is a good choice. I'm going to tell you right now that I don't have her on my list.
Okay.
And here's why. Because it's kind of a technicality thing. I thought about it, but to me, she's more of an assassin than a bounty hunter. And they're a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
However, I will say that if she is classified as a bounty hunter, then yeah, dude, obviously. Asajj is one of my favorite characters. Yep. And in fact, I'm going to go a step further, and you know this. Actually, anybody that's been watching this show for a while knows this, that once I read Dark Disciple, that's when my love of Asajj just shot up 100-fold. And that was actually furthered with was it Dooku Jedi Lost?
Yeah, Jedi Lost, yep.
Yeah. Those two books. If you're an Asajj Ventress fan, go out right now and get Dark Disciple. I wish I was making affiliate income on this, but I'm not. So so there's no link to click, no nothing. I don't care where y'all buy it. Just go out and buy Dark Disciple and buy Dooku Jedi Lost. Now, I'm warning you guys, if you do go out and buy Dooku Jedi Lost, it reads a little bit more like a TV script because that's what it was. So it's a little bit weird at first.
Well, before I get into this, and I'm sure I'm getting some flack from Boba. He says, seriously, that witch? And I was like, and Dwight is actually, he sees where I'm going with this. Yeah, she's technically a bounty hunter. And that's because, especially after she left the side of Dooku, that's when her...
Read the rest of it.
Even even though
Yeah,
that's
you're not.
cheating,
Come
bro.
on now. You're reading the part of this text that you like. I see how that is. Yeah, technically it was a bounty hunter. There's a period there, so you're gonna stop.
Grammatically, I have to.
But you know what? But I like the second part of his comment though.
He said, even though that's cheating, bro. No, this. But see, the thing is though, and that's hey, I don't make the rules. I just bend them. So the thing is that once Asajj has left the side of Dooku after he betrayed her, she became a bounty hunter.
Yeah, I know. I mean,
And so you can't, now you have a bounty hunter that's actually basically, I can't call her a Sith, but basically she has assassin slash Sith training. So to me,
yeah,
that's
I mean,
I mean,
well, and yes, I mean that's why I said that. Yes, I mean, well, that was one of the reasons why too, because I mean, if she really wasn't ever a bounty hunter, I
yeah,
would have been texting you like, dude, you got to pick another number 2, man.
yeah.
But I mean, I know, and it was funny because when I saw your list, I was like, you know what? I mean, technically, for me, I was just trying to keep it a little bit more pure. That's all. It was one of those things that, like, technically it's true, got to leave Asajj on there because she technically is.
From a certain point of view, yes.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, her story almost mirrors Ahsoka.
Mm-hmm.
In the sense of, so Ahsoka was a Jedi, then she left, and now she's not. I mean, I don't really know what she is at this point, but not really a Jedi, right?
Regular citizen.
Regular citizen, helping people and stuff like that, but just not technically a Jedi. And that's pretty much where Asajj is, because she wasn't really a Sith either. I mean, she definitely fell into the assassin role. I think the most that you can maybe say about her is maybe she was an acolyte. I mean, that might have been like the furthest she would have reached if that was the case. But yeah, I mean, undoubtedly, it's true. I mean, you could almost put her at number 1, really, because if you're going to go by skill.
If you're going to go by skill set, yeah, you have to put her at number 1.
Yeah, because, I mean, there's not really, I mean, she was fighting Anakin. She was, I mean, she was
even
really.
fought Dooku. I mean, that's what I'm saying. She could fight Sith.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like, she's really, really powerful.
She's
even so much that
much,
the Emperor had to kind of like, hey.
Yeah, she's got to go.
Yep.
And again, she's a really compelling character. I mean, she starts out a little bit two-dimensional when you first see her on the Clone Wars, but then as time goes on, and then of course, the whole Rebels thing.
Yeah, you see the depth of her character.
You do. You just, I mean, and then of course, like I said, you go out and you get those 2 books I mentioned. I mean, you really begin to see that this character has a lot of depth,
Dwight, well, Boba Fett says she was a backstabbing witch, and then Dwight says, "LOLs, Asajj and Ahsoka were moderates."
Yeah, exactly. Like, kind of like centrists, if you will. Yeah, well, I think that's one of the things that makes them somewhat compelling too, because if you remember at the end of that one Clone Wars arc, Asajj basically kind of turned and started trying to help Ahsoka. And I think it's really compelling to me. Usually the whole redemption arc feels a bit cliched and it could be kind of stupid. I mean, when it happened to Vader, it was kind of new, especially in the Star Wars universe, right? That was like an unexpected, like, oh, no way. With Kylo, it was something that I actively did not want them to do, but I was really shocked at when they did it. I was just like, man, I can't believe how much I actually am enjoying this. Like, I really like Ben Solo,
Right.
And I wanted to see more of him. And I kind of felt that same way about Asajj. I thought her actually turning maybe more neutral, not 100% good, really. I thought that was a stroke of genius, too, and that was something that was unexpected. So,
who you got, man?
My number 2.
Drop your number 2.
Well, I mean, you knew. Well, wait a minute. So, Boba Fett is bored. Boba Fett is out. Oh, man, you're going to miss, like, our number 1 our number one thing.
Our number one pick, yeah.
Yeah. Well, you can always watch the rebroadcast. It's always good to have Boba with us. But speaking of who's my number two, my number two is none other than Mr. Cad Bane. So this guy, once again, he's another one of those characters that he's introduced in the Clone Wars, and I just think that he's just incredible.
Definitely.
You know, he doesn't pop up a whole lot, and a lot of times I think that this is the problem that they have with a lot of characters, is that they'll create somebody really cool and then they'll use them to death. Right? Or they do something like what they do with Boba where they don't use him probably enough. I would actually argue that they didn't use Boba Fett enough in the original trilogy.
I agree.
You know, I thought they used him effectively, but I don't think they used him enough. Cad Bane, on the other hand, I think that they put him in the storyline exactly where he fit, and they didn't overuse him. And he was really cool. You want to talk about somebody that I want to see in live action? This is the guy. This is the guy that I definitely want to see in live action. God, Dwight says the Mad Hatter. But, you know, Cad is one of those, I really hope to see him featured in maybe some other stuff. Because right now we're getting him in, you know, I mean, we had him in the Clone Wars. Did he pop up in Rebels? I'm trying to remember. I thought he did, but maybe he didn't.
No, that was Hondo did, but that was not.
Hondo did, yeah.
But not Cad.
See, and Hondo would have been somebody that I would have put up there, but he's technically a pirate.
Right.
So he would be ineligible for this list. All right, so now we're getting to our number one picks.
I think I already know what yours is now.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like, you know, and I know what yours is because I'm looking at it. But it's one of those things where, you know, we get down to the number one. So before we do that, you know, I had to build up enough suspense here. But this is actually kind of interesting. Well, before we get to the number one comment, Dwight was like, no, not Rebels. Yeah, I didn't think he was in Rebels. Which is why it's kind of a shame that they don't bring him into stuff. But go ahead, reveal your number one.
Well, my number one is your number two, Cad Bane. Cad Bane is my number one guy, man. And the reason why is the guy's is awesome. He's super cool. I mean, he has everything that a bounty hunter should have. Like, he had the look. He had the swagger. He definitely was like the slyest of the sly and super crafty. And the fact that the reason why I put him over Asajj is because, see, with Asajj, she has the advantage of the Force, you know. However, Cad Bane, the fact that he's able to do what he's been able to do against the Jedi and outsmart, you know, all of them, you know, in a lot of situations without any of that ability. And he's always prepared to deal with Jedi. You know, he's always kind of that step ahead of the competition. And like I said, I mean, he just has that whole gravitas when he walks on the scene. You know, he gets the job done pretty much almost all the time. And, you know, you have to just look at like the efficiency rate of Cad Bane. The guy almost never loses.
Well, and I mean, again, think about this too, because he was my number two guy.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Cad Bane, I mean, granted, the Clone Wars did come out a little while ago now, but, you know, 15 years ago, something like that. But he's still relatively new in the Star Wars world, right? He's still a relatively new character. But here's the thing about him. He looks really cool. He looks menacing.
Mm-hmm.
He feels menacing whenever he's on the screen. Like, you feel that sinister,
Yep.
uncomfortable.
That voice,
know-
too, the one that Ronaldo said he smokes like 30 cigars a day.
Yes, Cad Bane sounds like he smoked 30 cigars, and then Dwight says that's per day. That's per day. And I mean, it's one of those things that I just think that he's so menacing and he's so cool and I put him above a lot of really familiar characters, that have been around for a long time. And it's precisely for all those reasons that you mentioned.
And he's also a master strategist. I mean, because, how he even found out that Obi-Wan wasn't the character that Obi-Wan was trying to impersonate.
Mm-hmm.
Cad Bane was the one who was like picking up on everything, like, okay, something's not right. And this everything that went on, like I said, Cad Bane was just always a step ahead for the most part. And if he wasn't a step ahead, he pretty much knew how to get himself out of almost any situation.
Oh, absolutely.
Now, I understand that Boba Fett is mad because he said, how can you put that bug before my father? This is rigged. As I said before. And then
Ronaldo says, guys, I think Boba is going to collect 2 bounties today.
Well,
could very well be.
I'm just going to, Boba Fett, I feel disgusted when I see him on the screen. Well, here's the thing. You're definitely not going to like this. However, truth is truth. Cad Bane's gone up against Jedi and didn't die.
Oh.
Just saying.
Yeah.
I think I bought you a few more hours there.
Yeah, you probably did. Well, it's funny too. One of the things that was interesting about like Cad Bane, right? He instantly sort of his demeanor and his look, especially with the hat. You know what he reminds me of? Is Tote from Indiana Jones. Like Raiders of the Lost Ark. He kind of looked like a somewhat mechanical Tote. That's exactly. And Tote, when I was a kid and I watched Raiders of the Lost Ark, he's the one that freaked me out the most. Mm-hmm. Like every time he came into a room, it was just kind of like, I mean, you knew something bad was going to happen. And that's kind of how Cad Bane is for me, where he's one of those guys that you just know things are about to get real. So he's a good choice. He's a good choice for number 1.
Well, I think, you're going to buy yourself a few more hours with your number 1.
I do. I think because, you know what? Yeah, I'm actually kind of happy now that I did this.
Go ahead, brown over.
So we got, we got the man himself. You know what? My number 1 is Boba Fett. That's right. Just gonna leave that up there for a second.
Let it marinate and simmer.
Let it simmer. That's right, Boba Fett. And here's the thing, because I could have easily flip-flopped. No offense to Boba Fett, I could have easily flip-flopped Cad Bane and Boba, because Cad, I think, actually did make that much of an impression. I think he's that compelling of a character. But you go back to it, man. Boba Fett has just had the advantage of longevity with me.
Mm-hmm.
From the moment that you saw him, first you see the armor and the whole, the outfit, and it's cool. And then on top of that, the way that it's kind of like, no disintegrations. And then he just is like, as you wish, like, okay, whatever. Even Vader, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even Vader. So Boba Fett says, your mind tricks don't work on me.
Only money.
And then Dwight says, Boba beat Bane. That's right. I kind of forgot about that, actually. But
when?
It was, I'm trying to remember what it was, because I remember it was like, what was it? It wasn't a comic, was it? I don't know. Chat it in, somebody.
Yeah, Dwight definitely got to tell me this one.
But the interesting thing is that pretty much Boba Fett, from the few lines that he had, and again, this is a criticism that I had where I don't think they used him enough. But that said, though, I have to say, man, the few lines that he had, he really made an impression on people, myself included, to where I was totally a Boba Fett fan. I was that guy that right after he appeared on the holiday special, they had this thing. So it was before Empire Strikes Back came out, but obviously Kenner knew that they were going to have Boba Fett in the movie, right? So they basically had this thing that if you clipped out 10 proof of purchase things from your action figures, that you can send those in plus like $3 shipping or something, and you could actually get a Boba Fett figure. You could get before they were ever released anywhere else. And of course I did that, which was, I mean, insane because those figures weren't cheap back then. So naturally, my poor parents had to buy like 10 of them so I could get the proof of purchase seal so I could send them in and get my Boba Fett figure. But where I was upset about it, though, was the fact that when I got it, he didn't have the little detachable rocket because some kid choked on it somewhere, and so they made it to where it didn't come out. But still, it was cool. And I think that the expanded universe did a lot, really, for Boba Fett. But, you know, I mean, it's just one of those things that I know it's kind of cliche. I know a lot of people might be like, yeah, of course he is. But, you know, I just think that he's a classic character for a reason. Now, you had him. Where'd you have him?
Who, Boba Fett?
Yeah, you had him like number 4. Yeah, number 4. So, I mean, and I can understand why. I mean, you know, the whole time that we were talking about him there, it was kind of like, you know, I wasn't really sure. But, you know, so just to reiterate here, so Daryl had basically a Cad Bane. And then, you know, I have Boba Fett. So these are like our number 1 and number 2 our actual number 1 choices respectively. So, you know, this is one of those things that I think that, again, it's subjective. Now, we said that after we gave our number 1, we were actually going to go a little bit into why we made the choices, how we decided to choose these. So go ahead, give our audience, why did you choose, or how did you come up with your choices?
So mine was like an amalgamation of a lot of different stuff. So it was skill, of course, the look, the impact that they've had on the universe. And then I just look at their track record as far as like their story, like how much have we heard, have we seen about these characters and their reputation. Pretty much that kind of like made me, you know, look at them. It's like, okay, from what I know, like I said, we don't know about, you know, Din Djarin. You know, we don't know what his story is because it's not finished yet. We don't know Boba's story because it's not finished yet. So Boba could move up to my number 1. You know, that's very possible because we still have the Book of Fett that's coming out. So that may actually glean a lot more into Boba Fett. And I might be like, you know what? There it is. You know, so I think for me, that's pretty much what it was. The skill set definitely played a part in it. And then their overall look, and then just story and and then of course, who do they go up against? Because that's always been my thing. It's like, you know, you're only as powerful as your opponent, really. So if you're fighting a bunch of, you know, Padawans, I mean, yeah. But when you start looking at like Jango and Cad Bane, these guys are going up against knights and masters.
Every time we say that, I keep wanting to go Django.
Oh, for the movie.
Yeah.
Oh,
even though it's spelled a little bit different, it's just like I can't say
silent.
that.
But yeah, so I think that's what really kind of, you know, opened my eyes to the characters. Is just, you know, who are their main antagonists. You know, like I said, you could say Bossk, like, okay, but you know, he's going after Padawans. When you're looking at Jango,
right,
and you're
it's
looking
like,
at Cad, yeah, like these guys are going after knights and masters, like, and holding their own at that. And that's the thing. It's like, okay, yeah.
Well, see, now for me, my list probably looked a little different because even though I was factoring all those in, I was factoring skill set, I was factoring some of this stuff, I was trying to remember that this is top 10 favorite, not necessarily top 10 best. And so a lot of it was really the impact that each of these characters had on me.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times, you know, even if you look at real life, right? Some of the people that have had the most profound effect on you are not the strongest or smartest people, but they might have affected your life in such a way that, it's just like crazy profound, or some of the leaders and stuff that have had the biggest effect on people have not been the strongest or whatever. They got a lot of wisdom and stuff like that. So I mean there's different factors that go into it. And it's the same thing with these characters, these bounty hunters. A lot of it, sometimes there's some that are just more compelling to me, where it's like, okay, this guy obviously could probably defeat this other one, but the other one I like better because they have a more compelling story. It's more interesting. I think that's the reason why Din actually went into more in the middle, where I think you had him at like number 7.
Yeah.
I had him at number 5 because it was the growth, it was the story, it was a lot of the things that I found really interesting. It wasn't so much like a two-dimensional character, because one of the things that I think we could both agree on with Star Wars is that there's really no truly two-dimensional characters in the franchise. I mean, somebody will probably point out, well, what about this guy? It's like, well, yeah, but if you think about it, you could take almost any character and make something really interesting. Like, for instance, when the original Star, like A New Hope came out, before it was even called A New Hope, and I went and I started collecting the action figures. Well, here's the thing that's funny about that. They had Snaggletooth and Hammerhead and Walrus Man and, like all these guys, and you're kind of like, okay, other than maybe reenacting the literal second and a half that they were on screen, except for maybe Walrus Man, because he was kind of, he did have a little bit of a scene, but still, he was just kind of standing there, right? Besides all that, you could actually make compelling stories on these guys, because everybody has a backstory. I always make fun of the hardcore, like super hardcore fans, right? The ones that there's like like some guy out of focus in the background in a scene that's on for a second, and these people could give you their entire backstory. But the fact that you could do that really shows the depth of a lot of these characters. And I just think that, with these bounty hunters, it's really interesting to me that all of them have really cool things about them that you could focus on, but you do have to put them in some sort of an order. And I think that that's what it comes down to, that you have to factor in some of the skill. You have to factor in, what time period, because it's like you said, they might go up against formidable opponents, but one guy's going up against Vader and another guy's going up against a Padawan or something, right? So that's kind of crazy. Ronaldo's got a question for us, doesn't he?
Yes, he says, if you could choose one to appear in Mandalorian, which one would you choose?
Wow, that's a good question.
Well, you can't say Boba Fett because that's already happened.
Yeah. Wow.
Well, while you're thinking,
I'm gonna say Cad Bane.
Yeah, so Cad Bane would be one. The other one for me would be Embo.
Embo would be cool. I'd like to see Black Chrysanthemum appear in Book of Boba Fett. Just because I'd love to see a live action of him, and I think that they could fit that story. I mean, Bossk, I've always loved to see Bossk and stuff, because I think that they could do a lot with him too. The Clone Wars is, so I mean, I could go for like Cad Bane, Bossk. It'd be kind of cool to see IG-88, Embo. We're just gonna be like all of them.
Yeah, whole top 10.
I wouldn't mind seeing Asajj and Ahsoka. I think that could fit.
She died, didn't she?
Yeah, but so did Darth Maul.
Oh, here we go.
Hey, look,
That's
man,
true.
I'm
That's
sorry.
true.
I am
know.
sorry, but if you could chop somebody in half and they could fall down a shaft, I mean, that's even worse than Palpatine.
Right. At least he just got launched down the shaft.
Yeah,
but
he got launched down the shaft. You could come up with all kinds of different explanations for him. Darth Maul got chopped in half, fell down a shaft, and he's in like practically every series in the saga. I mean, he just didn't come back. He came back with a vengeance. He's like in everything.
Yep, and he had an integral part too. That's the crazy thing.
Exactly. I mean, you want to talk about a character that had probably the biggest comeback story of all time in Star Wars. You got to give it to Darth Maul.
Definitely.
For that reason. I'd say, well, it'd be kind of cool to see Darth Maul in there, but we probably are. There was a rumor that came out today that we might see Han Solo and Kira end up in The Mandalorian. Now, they don't know if they're going to have Alden Ehrenreich play him, or is it going to be one of those, hey, we're just going to de-age Harrison Ford kind of things? We don't know. But if they're thinking about bringing Kira into it, I mean, again, by that time, because Maul was technically killed again, but, who knows? This is Star Wars. It's either Star Wars or Friday the 13th. I'm not exactly sure which at this point. Because Maul is definitely like the Jason Voorhees. But it would be really interesting to me to see some of these bounty hunters pop up in The Mandalorian, because it's either that or the Book of Boba Fett. Now, which do you think would be a better vehicle for them?
As far as
Book of Boba Fett or Mandalorian?
For which character?
Ooh, really gonna any of them?
I think the Book of Boba Fett would be the better one.
That's what I'm thinking too, because if he's taking over Jabba's whole enterprise or whatever, it just lends itself more to see more bounty hunters. I mean, I could see a few of them pop up in the Mandalorian, but I don't know. I just don't want them to start shoehorning characters in,
Right.
But I mean, I definitely would like to see Cad Bane appear in something.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they've got to. I mean, you want to talk about like Thrawn level excitement, which of course we still got that to look forward to as well. But man, I will just like lose it if I see Cad Bane in something.
Definitely.
All right, well, that is our top 10 favorite, not best, favorite bounty hunters. So why don't you guys who are watching the rebroadcast of this, or if you guys just want to, anybody that's been chatting along, but whoever wants to, put your list of top 10 favorite bounty hunters in the comments section, and we could start a discussion there. If you guys are liking what you see and you want to see more of these programs, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell so you know exactly when we put something out. We do go live every Monday and Friday at 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern time, so, make sure that you catch us this Friday. I'm not actually sure what we're talking about this Friday yet. We haven't really chosen yet, have we?
Nope.
Yeah, see? So you guys are just going to have to wait.
Yeah, I may or may not be there just due to I might be in Carbonite due to Boba Fett. So
well, it'll either be me or maybe I can strong arm Dave Kazi into coming on. So, we'll just oh, yeah, right. But hey, I might be too. Might have to have Ronaldo and Dwight host the show. Right. Watch, they would do it. We'd probably be like, wow, this is like better than us.
Just hand it over to them.
Exactly. We're chatting. Eric says, but no. You know what? Thanks for joining us on another episode of Head to Head, the Star Wars show. We hope you guys will join us again Friday. With that, I'm Eric Vansel.
And I'm Daryl Sanders.
May the Force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.